back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it.
KDArmor.com is your one-stop shop for the most affordable body armor, period. With packages starting at $169.99 and free shipping on every order. KD offers soft armor and rifle threat rated armor up to level 4. Go to KDArmor.com and get your body armor today while you still can. Mention this ad and receive a free tactical scarf for a limited time with any body armor package. That's CATIarmor.com.
Whether it's a grid down situation or just a temporary power outage from a storm, a sun oven will allow you to harness the power of the sun. Not only will you conserve resources, you'll maintain operational security by not sending up smoke. You can cook or dehydrate just about anything, including bread, muffins, roasts, jerky, beans, rice, and so much more. Go to sunoven.com/PrepperRecon for an $80 discount off a deluxe package. Today's guest is Fabian Calvo of FabianForLiberty.com. Fabian, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's great having you on. We love getting your unique insight into stuff. Let's start out. Let's talk about the stability of the banking system. How volatile do you think it is right now?
Well, I think, as long as they have the ability, the big mega banks have the ability to tap the Federal Reserve. Obviously, there's the owners of the Federal Reserve for 0% lines of credit. It's as stable as it is. It's a matter of when does that ability cease to exist, and that'll be when the banks ultimately fail. I mean, you look at 2008 when they bailed out the supposed too big to fails. I mean, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citi, these were all banks that should have had in essence, filed bankruptcy because of what their exposure to toxic assets. And what happened was the government, which they basically own and operate, came in and bailed them out. And then you had 6 months later, they were turning a $14 billion profit. So, it's extremely unstable is my short answer to that question, Mark. But I mean, there's kind of an explanation that comes with it, obviously, right? They have the hands to the purse. They control the purse. So, as long as they can keep that up, they can keep getting away with the criminality and operate with impunity.
Now, because of your line of work, you work a lot with the banks, very closely with some of them, and sometimes you end up in some very high-level closed-door meetings. Are the people in those rooms are they pretty confident that the system's going to be able to maintain the status quo for some time through monetary policy and borrowing from the Fed for next to nothing?
Well, I think the ones, there's really, they fall into two different groups. There's the ones that won't even really talk about that subject matter. And then the other ones that do talk about it, they will, a lot of times, yeah, they believe, I'd say unfortunately a majority, believe that the Fed can work it out and think that, this is just like any other economic cycle, which it's not, because we are in uncharted financial territory here. No country has ever done what the United States government is doing or what the Federal Reserve is doing with the quantitative easing programs to the extent that we've done it at, not to mention the overall debt that this country has when you factor in unfunded liabilities and everything else. The smaller group do believe that this will ultimately fail, but all those people believe, Mark, that will continue to have financial markets. Many of them see it as an opportunity when this reset does happen, but that group does believe, like you and I and like many of the listeners, that this is basically it's an unsustainable economic model where eventually the wheels come off.
Now, there's been a lot of talk from biblical prophecy side of the aisle, and then a lot of secular analysts that are seeing this fall as potentially being a very volatile time period. What do you think?
I look at different economic indicators for my analysis, and certainly there's different black swan events that we really can't factor in, but I guess, we should also factor in, if that makes sense, because, there's a few that I could think of that, could potentially happen. When it comes to more of the biblical thing, I know that the author Jonathan Kahn has, I know I get a lot of comments on my Facebook and YouTube channels and emails, people that ask me if I've read his work. I know he's calling for some kind of economic calamity, possibly by the end of this year. And when it comes to the biblical thing, I have a really good, he's almost like a spiritual mentor of mine. Mark, he's in his early 90s, and he's a Baptist preacher. And he tells me all the time when I ask him about questions like these, he tells me, Fabian, for as long as I've been alive, there's been people talking about either the rapture or some other kind of biblical prophecy coming true that will lead to doom and gloom. And it just hasn't happened. No one knows when something like that's going to happen. And I kind of agree with that analysis.
And what do you think about the Trans-Pacific Partnership? We've got Paul Ryan. That's he's basically one of the big cheerleaders for what's now being termed Obama trade. Now he came in on the Tea Party ticket. Is this something that you think the Tea Party should be behind, the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Well, that question's laughable, Mark, but it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, here again we see there is no difference policy-wise, for the exception of a handful, no difference between Republicans and Democrats other than the rhetoric. I believe Ted Cruz as well is supporting not only the TPP, but they're also supporting allowing the president, and not just Obama, but future presidents as well, to in essence fast-track any trade deals where Congress simply gets an up or down vote, which is insane. I mean, you look at, for example, England, joining the EU. Well, it was only revealed, among many other things, in that treaty to join the EU, that they outlawed fox hunting in England. The people that the people that weren't in on the trade negotiation, they didn't know that. Just like they didn't know a bunch of other things that were in it as well. I mean, now come to find out, they're also talking about immigration is discussed in this TPP, and also not just immigration, but just a wide range of economic issues that have nothing to do with trade. So it's not really shocking that the Republicans are jumping on board and supporting this. I don't think it should be called Obama trade, because quite frankly, these are policies, these type of trade deals that hurt the middle class, hurt the working class in this country, have been pushed by Bill Clinton, have been pushed by Bush, have been pushed by all these guys in both parties. I think what it does show to me, though, Mark, like I said, is that there is no difference between the two parties. They both work for the same exact master, and that is the big banking cartels that not only run this government, but that run the majority of governments across the country.
And you were on the show about a year ago, and you said that you expected another real estate bubble, and we're certainly seeing prices reinflating since then. And the word real estate bubble is starting to be on a lot of people's lips now. You think we're getting near the top on that, or you think we still have a ways to go?
No, I actually think we still have a ways to go, and I think that and I've said this for some time now, but the real estate bubble, I'm surprised it's not talked about more within just economic analysis in general, especially people that are more Austrian economic minded, like the individuals that you and I will read or that we watch their commentary, like the Peter Schiffs and many others, Jim Rogers, people like that, because it is such a key to the overall economy. I think that we'll know when the crash is coming, when the real estate market just gets absolutely out of control. I think that's really the last leg that they have, or maybe one of the last legs that they have to really try to create this artificial boom. And they're going to do it by expanding Fannie Mae loans, which are already taking off like crazy, where people with basically 600 or below credit scores can get loans. I said this many times before in other interviews and in some of my commentary that I keep in touch with just throughout my business, with about a couple dozen real estate agents in that are top producers in markets across the country. And it's a pretty easy way of also keeping, I also do business in those markets, but it's an easy way of keeping my hand on the pulse of those markets. All of them tell me that there's bidding wars on properties. That price point below $500,000, there's bidding wars for most of the properties. And, the prices in all those markets haven't surpassed what they were in 05 and 06, but I think certainly we're headed in that direction. So, yeah, I think we're in the middle of another real estate bubble. I think it'll get bigger, and I think that it will I think when we see things just go completely nuts like we did in 05, 06, I think that's when the multi-bubble crash is around the corner.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. I've personally been buying gold and silver from JM Bullion for over 2 years. They offer the best prices over spot that I can find, and I've never had a problem with an order. If you're looking to trade in some of your fiat paper for real money, check out jmbullion.com today.
When disaster strikes, it's too late to prepare. PrepperRecon.com offers MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits for your home, auto, or bug-out bag. These kits have everything you need to address a traumatic injury, including an Israeli battle dressing, quick clot, EMT shears, suture kit, Steri-strips, tourniquet, ACS chest seal, tough strip bandages, gauze, and so much more. $89 includes shipping. To buy your individual first aid kit, go to PrepperRecon.com and click the store tab at the top of the homepage. Order today before it's too late.
And you've been talking about getting out of the job paradigm for a while. Can you explain what that means?
Well, job paradigm, is just over broke, and right now with all of the things that we talk about and that we see with the economy, with the draconian state and the statists wanting to take more of our liberty away. Believe it or not, I'm a firm believer that we are actually entering, and have already entered, the what I call the golden age of business. Never before in the history of really mankind has someone been able to open and operate a business with very little money out of pocket, implementing the tools of the internet, reach a global market. I mean, this is the first. And so the job paradigm is over. I mean, with automation, globalization, the robots, the different applications that are on phones, all this technology, is replacing a lot of jobs and will continue to do that. I think it was MIT that talked about that in the next 10 years, 60% of the jobs that will exist, we don't even know about today, not to mention that 50% of all the jobs that are held today will be completely gone. So, someone that's, I think the concept, Mark, of trading your time for money, which is what a job technically is an outdated model. Certainly there's people that will continue to live in that model, and they always have. But I think it's more about trading your value, the value you create for money. I'll give you in your case, for example, you've written a bunch of really, really, really good books. People want to read that book to not only enjoy and have that fulfillment, but also to learn and educate themselves about preparedness and things of that nature. They'll trade their money for that value that you've created. And when you think of it that way, Mark, I mean, look, I think all of us are born with unique abilities, with certain talents and techniques and traits that and passions too that we love. And what makes it great about the golden age of business is that you could actually create your own job, or really become an entrepreneur doing something that you would love. So I would suggest for people that are listening to this program, I mean, if you're in the JOB paradigm, if you're trading your time for money, I'm not saying that you go quit your job today. What I am saying, though, is that you begin to, just like we have food storage and guns and gold and everything else, and have an escape plan and have all these other preparedness things underway, I think we have plans to prepare for financial, for basically being self-reliant, financially self-reliant, and be able to support ourselves financially from anywhere in the world. And that's what the golden age of business allows us. I mean, one last quick point on that, Mark, is that you could do this podcast, you could write your books from anywhere in the world. I could do the same thing. I can work from anywhere in the world. And that, to me, is real freedom, where I can leave the United States if I want to. I can go wherever I want and still be able to provide for myself and my family. I personally think that's where it's at.
And let's talk about the global economic reset. Where do you think we are in that?
Well, we're certainly knee deep in it. I mean, or now up to our eyeballs, really. I mean, I was looking at some older YouTube videos that I had posted, and I did one almost 2 years ago, about 18 months ago, and it was about 7 steps to the global economic reset. And in it, I watched the video. It's about 17 minutes long. I posted it to my Facebook page, and it was only 18 months ago. And I remember at the time that I was writing out the analysis and preparing for it, Mark, I said to myself, my God, some of these things, are a little bit out there, but I really believed it. And sure enough, I look at that video today, and things like this Eastern superbloc alliance that's being formed between the Russians, the Chinese, and Iran. Certainly it's underway. Certainly it's being built up it's being built up, I think they believe, to defend themselves from the West and to be able to create their own power block to challenge the West. When we look at the unsustainable debt loads that have been added in the United States, that just continues and continues. When we look at bilateral trade agreements, when we look at the new Asian infrastructure bank that the Chinese have set up, and we see that 42 countries are chomping at the bit, many of them U.S. allies, to come on board. I mean, the list is very long. China continuing to buy gold. There's rumors that they will release their new gold holdings by the end of the year. They could surpass Germany's, putting them in the second spot. If you do believe that the U.S. does have 8,000 plus tons of gold, which I don't believe. But so yeah, I think we're moving very quickly along that path. I said a couple weeks ago that I think that the TPP is actually the blueprint for much of the global economic reset. I think is contained within the TPP. It's one of the reasons they don't want the public to read it. So we find out just about a week ago that now Obama is saying that he'd consider allowing China to join in that agreement. I think that's all been planned. So things are definitely moving. They're moving much quicker than I thought they actually would be, Mark, to be honest.
And do you think people are wrong to think that the reset will be marked by a singular catastrophic event? Do you think it could just be the slow motion decline that we've been witnessing since 2008?
Well, it certainly could be. It certainly could be, but at the same time, it could be something like the Chinese the Chinese economic minister comes out, and basically finance minister comes out and makes some disparaging comments regarding the U.S. dollar, or perhaps they directly challenge the dollar as a world reserve currency. It could be something as simple as that. Certainly, the slow grind is going to continue. Whether we see, and I think that slow grind will continue, and I think that we will also see, events that shock the market as well. Like I said, a finance minister could come out and say something. There's the Saudis could, who are the number one oil exporter in the world, they could come out and say that they're not going to take the dollar anymore, or that they'll take other currencies instead of the dollar. That's one of the reasons that that the dollar has been able to remain. The global reserve currency for so long, I believe, is because all oil, they have to buy it in dollars. The Saudis have already come out and said that they would be open to selling their oil. So I think it could be various different events like that lead to what the bottom line being is that the trust in the U.S. dollar from foreign countries is eroding extremely quickly. And so when you have events like this come out, it makes them, I think, put their foot on the gas pedal even quicker to try to come up with an alternative. And look, whatever the alternative is, whether it's a new basket of currencies, I don't think it's going to be the Chinese currency that replaces the dollar. It'll likely be a basket of currencies. But once they depeg from the dollar, it's going to be severe pain for every country, no matter who they are. I mean, China will certainly go into a depression, as many other countries will, but ultimately they will get out of it, and it'll be much better for them economically. The sooner they ditch the dollar, the better. So yeah, I think it's really a combination of both, Mark.
How do you recommend that folks hedge themselves against this?
Well, certainly for me, I mean, I would recommend to people do everything that you talk about in form of preparation, because I think when these events do happen, we're going to see, Baltimore riots times 10 across the country. Because look, the bottom line is when people cannot feed themselves and their families, there's complete chaos and the thin veneer of society breaks down quickly. So I think that's number one. Number two is I think that people need to focus on getting out of the JOB paradigm as quickly as they can. Try to enter that entrepreneur space. People will say, well, it's not for me, or I'm too old, or I'm too young. And I think the world has changed so fundamentally that anyone listening today can be able to create a lifestyle, not where they're going to be, making millions of dollars, but they'll be able to make enough to live comfortably and to support themselves and their family outside of having to trade their time for money. And then the third thing is that I would, it's something I do all the time and I'm looking all the time. In fact, at the end of September, I'm hosting a trip of 7 people down to Colombia to look at different assets. I'm finding some farmland down there. And I think looking at other countries where their governments don't have a Federal Reserve Bank that allows them to build up these insane police states. I may not agree with, Argentina's, policies or some of these other Ecuadors, but they don't have the manpower nor the finances to have this police state if you live out in the country or whatever it is. And, there's a lot of great places around the world that you can live very, very affordably for. I would think about that. I mean, look, if I was in my 60s collecting Social Security, I'd likely get the heck out of here and move to a country where that $1,500 I get a month would allow me to live like a king. And there's a lot of countries out there where there's big expat communities that are thriving and growing that one can choose from. So I think those are the three things that I would keep, that I'd be aware of and I'd be working on.
And let's talk a little bit about social decline. We've had a lot of stuff. You just mentioned the Baltimore riots, and of course we've had Ferguson, and it just feels like people are on edge. Do you feel like social cohesion's starting to break down?
Certainly, it's breaking down with race relations in this country, and it's pushed by the media. It's pushed by channels like MSNBC and Fox News. It's pushed by the new and the former Department of Justice, Loretta Lynch, and the guy that was there before, I forgot his name. So it's pushed by all of these different institutions and outlets because it's all for the elite that run the country, for the banking cabals. They know that the divide and conquer principle. It's why we've heard this concept of divide and conquer since we were kids, and that's exactly what they do. They're looking to, instead of have people come together, they're looking to divide us, and it's why we today in America have African American, Asian American, Cuban American, Irish American. What about just being American? Well, that doesn't work when you have a power structure that constantly wants to divide the people. Instead of bringing them together, they want to make things different. And when you have it that splintered or that balkanized, you just have to pour a little bit of gas on the fire to make it really roar into a blazing fire. So yes, we're seeing that happen. We've seen it in the places that you've mentioned, Ferguson, Baltimore. And that's really been based on police shootings and these other things. I think, Mark, where it gets really scary is when it's based on no food at the local grocery store. The just-in-time delivery system in this country breaks down, even if it breaks down for a couple of weeks. That's where I think that's where things get really, really scary. And I think, I don't want to make it my life thinking about these things, but I certainly want to be prepared in the event that happens. So yeah, I think socially, the divisions in this country are absolutely growing, which is unfortunate. I have 2 small children. I want them to grow up in an America that is free, that people are nice to each other, and but unfortunately we see things are eroding in that area.
And as you mentioned, there's been some instances where some police have done some things and not been held accountable for it. One of the things that comes to mind is the Fineshevon family in Georgia, where they threw the flashbang and it landed in the crib of the baby and disfigured the baby and almost killed it. And they haven't been reimbursed at all by the police department for any of the medical costs due to that. And I think when stuff like that happens, I think that the police sort of lose credibility, and their authority comes into question by the public. But now there's been a lot of other things like Darren Wilson, which from what I can see from the videos of Mike Brown, he looked like he was a thug, and he looked like he was really the way he was treating the attendant at the convenience store that he had just robbed. He looks like a very intimidating person, and I can certainly see him doing what Darren Wilson accused him of doing. And I think that there's some police are doing the right thing and they're getting in trouble for it, and then others are doing the wrong thing and they're not getting in trouble for it. And what we're getting out of that now is what they're terming now is the Ferguson effect, where police are just standing back in a lot of instances when it comes to discretionary policing, and they're just kind of backing up, and that's kind of emboldening a lot of criminals to just go ahead and do whatever they want to do. So I think that's dangerous as well.
Yeah, great point, Mark. I mean, look, in New York, you've seen since they elected a radical progressive communist as mayor, who has backed off a lot of the policing efforts that were being pushed. Which, by the way, the policing efforts there in New York City, basically the one where they can stop and frisk you anytime they want, I'm completely against that. But the way that they roll it out has led to homicides in New York increasing, I think it was by 15 or 18% since de Blasio was elected. And so I think a majority of police are good. I think that they're doing their job and trying to keep people safe and to uphold law and order. It only takes a few to basically spoil the bunch, and unfortunately, that attention goes to all the bad ones that are doing things like the cop that shot that black guy in the park, and then you had another. They shot him 7 times as he was running away, and then you have another black police officer help him cover it up. I think those are absolutely horrible, and those police officers need to be held accountable. But again, I think the majority of police are good, and I think society, once again, I think that there is a planned attempt, if you will, Mark, to delegitimize police and make them the bad guys. And certainly that's what I see when I tune into the government-run propaganda outlets like CNN and MSNBC.
Yeah, and the policeman that shot the man in the back several times, he did go to he is being prosecuted for murder. But the guy that was going to help him cover it up, I think you hit an important point there. And that blue wall of silence is what they call it, of police that are going to stick up for their brothers no matter what. I think those guys, they need to rethink that, and I think they need to stick up for what's right no matter what. And if your partner did the right thing, then stick up for him. But you're in that position to uphold the law and to uphold truth and justice, and I think that they need to be more committed to that than that blue wall of silence. And I think you're right, and I think that really delegitimizes them in the eyes of the public as well.
No doubt about it. And it's interesting because in a lot of neighborhoods, police will say, well, there's this policy of where they won't snitch on the bad guy. And the police do the same thing. And I think that when it comes to breaking the law, I think that police officers should stand up and do the right thing. But like I said, I think overwhelmingly the police are good and are doing very difficult work that most people would not want to do. Policing some of these tough ghettos is, I'm sure, I wouldn't know, but I could only assume it's a very difficult job. And I also think, too, Mark, that a lot of it has to do with our drug laws as well. That's why I'm a big proponent of decriminalizing drugs. I think it would lower crime, and in a lot of the crime that is based on drugs and people addicted to drugs that are going out and stealing or committing crimes, I think it would cease to exist if you had if you had a different way of treating people that are addicted to drugs, instead of treating them like criminals, treating them like people, almost like a cancer patient. These are people that are sick and need help. I think it'll be less expensive, and I think that it'll also allow the cops to focus on fighting real crime.
Yeah, and maybe another thing we could mention is that because I know a lot of police officers listen to the show, is kind of thinking through, what are you going to do when the command comes out, like it did in Watertown after the Boston bombing, that we're going to go and do house-to-house warrantless searches? Are you going to participate in that, or are you going to lay your badge down? And can you get a big enough group of the people in your department to take a pledge to say, when an unconstitutional edict comes from upstairs, we can all walk off and there will be nobody to enforce that. And I think that maybe that's something that officers need to think about as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Mark. As you're saying that, what popped into my mind was, and they're completely different, but the guy who shoots the unarmed black guy running in the park, shoots him 7 times in the back, is completely illegal and wrong. Just like police breaking into my home to search my home without a warrant is completely wrong. And I think once police begin to break the laws on the books, just because some agency, some alphabet soup agency is telling them that's what you need to go do, that's where the potential for society breaking down potentially happens even faster. Because if the police aren't upholding, protecting our constitutional rights, then what? I mean, they're the ones who should be most vigilant regarding the Fourth Amendment and illegal search and seizures. And certainly in Boston it wasn't the case, and after Katrina it wasn't the case, where they went in and took people's guns. So yeah, that's policing today is a very difficult job in a world of 24-hour news where 15, 20 years ago nobody gave a crap about Ferguson, and today you have the media parked out there for 2 months covering it. And so yeah, it's certainly not an easy job. I have tremendous respect for the people in the police department, and I just think though that they got to really, really do like what you just said. They got to really think about what they're going to do when those illegal orders are issued.
Yeah, we've got a lot of problems on our plate for the society, economic and social and everything else. And I think that it's like you said, the best thing folks can do is think about what you can do to make the situation better, and what you can do to be part of the solution, and getting out of the job paradigm and preparing yourself. And if you're prepared, and if you've got things squared away for yourself and your family, at a bare minimum, you're not part of the problem. But maybe from there, you can keep going and gather up some extra resources and pay it forward and things like that, and start helping others as well. Fabian, you've given us so much great stuff to think about today. Can you tell folks where they can go to find more of your work?
Yeah, they can go to Fabian4, that's Fabian the number 4, Fabian4liberty.com, or they can go to FabianCalvo.me, and Calvo is spelled C-A-L, V as in Victor, O.
And then also you got a YouTube channel.
Yeah, YouTube channel. All my videos are posted on FabianForLiberty.com. They could also subscribe from there. Also have a Facebook page, with all those links are on my main website, FabianForLiberty.com.
All right, Fabian, thanks so much for making time to come on the show today.
You bet, Mark. Thanks for having me.
In the Days of Noah, Book 2, Persecution by best-selling author Mark Goodwin. A globalist conspiracy transpires by way of a false flag attack against America's energy infrastructure. Noah and Cassandra Parker witness a complete economic meltdown, which is intentionally triggered by the event. The assault is blamed on patriots and Christians who are rounded up into detention centers across the country. Noah and his friends must take action to prepare for the meltdown and defend against the totalitarian regime, which is gunning for their freedom and, quite possibly, their very lives. Get your copy of The Days of Noah, Book 2, Persecution for Kindle, paperback or audio edition at Amazon.com today.